They told you the Vikings were fearless raiders, savage warriors of the sea. But what they never whispered, the part erased by monks and buried in sagas, is darker than any battlefield. When the raids were done and the fires cooled, the Vikings turned inward. Two rituals so secret, so terrifying, that even their enemies feared to speak of them. Rituals of blood, fire, sacrifice, and forbidden oaths. If you knew the truth, you'd never look at them the same way again. Tonight, you will. The year is 793 AD. The cold wind howls across the North Sea, carrying the scent of salt, iron, and something else, fear. On the holy island of Lindisfarne, monks chant softly in candlelit halls, their voices echoing against stone. But outside, beyond the horizon, longships slice through black waves like knives. Their sails are painted with red streaks, and carved dragons snarl at the sea. The men on board are restless. But it isn't just plunder that drives them tonight. No, their hunger runs deeper. You've heard the story, how the Vikings descended on Lindisfarne, slaughtered the Holy Brothers, and carried away treasure. But the truth you were never told is what happened after. When the fires of the monastery dimmed and the blood of martyrs ran black against the sand, the Vikings gathered not to divide their loot, but to perform a ritual, one darker than anything the monks had imagined. Picture the scene. A circle is drawn in the wet earth, torches burning with animal fat, shadows stretching long across the dunes. At the center lies a sacrifice, not always an enemy, sometimes even one of their own, chosen by lot or condemned for weakness. They believed the gods demanded balance. Victory in battle meant debt to Odin, and that debt had to be paid. The smell of smoke thickens, mingling with the iron tang of blood. A great silence falls as the Surtha, ritual leader, often a woman shrouded in fur, steps forward. Her staff rattles with bronze rings, and her eyes reflect the fire like twin coals. Here's the forbidden truth. The Vikings feared victory almost as much as defeat, because every victory risked offending the gods, if not repaid, and repayment came in blood. Some chronicles hint at the BLT, a sacrificial rite where animals, and sometimes humans, were offered to Odin, Freyr, or Thor. Archaeological digs at sites like Layer in Denmark have uncovered pits of animal bones and human remains, cut and arranged in patterns, too deliberate to be anything but ritual. Scholars debate it. Was it religion or raw terror disguised as faith? But listen closely. Even the sagas, written centuries later, speak in riddles. The blood eagle, was it real or a poetic metaphor? They say the ribs were split open, lungs pulled from the chest like wings, a ritual killing to honor Odin with pain so exquisite it opened a path to Valhalla. Some claim it never happened, but in the torchlight on that beach, with the waves pounding like drums, can you hear it? The silence breaking with a scream. And here's a twist they never told you. These rituals weren't only about pleasing gods. They were about control. Imagine standing in that circle as a young warrior, your first raid behind you. You see your Jarl, your leader, standing firm as the sacrifice is chosen. His face does not flinch. His voice does not waver. You realize in that moment that power isn't just about the axe, it's about who dares to speak to the gods, who dares to command the ritual. The BLT was politics dressed in blood. If you were there, standing among them, what would you have done? Would you have joined the chant, your voice trembling with fear, or turned away, knowing that one day it might be you at the center of the circle? The fire spits, embers rising into the night sky. The seer calls out to Odin, her voice harsh, carrying across the waves. A goat is slain, its blood caught in a bowl, sprinkled on the crowd with a branch. The warriors raise their hands, blood dripping down their arms, painting their faces. This is not barbarism to them. This is survival. Each drop binds them, reminding them that life and death are threads woven together by fate. But there's something darker still. Some accounts from Arab travelers, like Ahmad ibn Fadlan in the 10th century, describe Viking funerals where slaves were forced to die alongside their masters. A young girl, drugged with strong drink, lifted onto a ship, strangled, stabbed, her body burned with the dead. Imagine the crack of bone, the roar of fire, the stink of burning flesh carried across the river. Ibn Fadlan wrote that the girl laughed as if in ecstasy. But can we trust his words? Or was he masking terror behind poetry? The truth, I suspect, is somewhere worse. Let's return to Lindisfarne. The monks who survived spoke of horror, of men chanting in a language they could not understand, of fire and blood mingling in the holy soil. But what if they had stumbled upon the aftermath of a beal? What if they had glimpsed the Vikings, not as raiders, but as worshippers men, caught in the grip of rituals so alien that silence was the only way to process it? And here lies the question. Were these rituals madness? Or were they the heartbeat of a society that saw no line between war and worship? To the Vikings, death was not the end. It was a passage. And rituals, however cruel, were the key to opening that door. A chill runs through the dunes. The torches sputter. The sacrifice is complete. The warriors chant low, almost humming, their voices blending with the wind. They will sleep tonight, knowing they have paid their debt to Odin. But tomorrow, another raid will begin. Another debt will rise. The circle never ends. And now, let me tell you the secret that will haunt the rest of this tale. These rituals didn't fade with time. They grew darker, stranger, and more forbidden. And some of them, whispered in sagas and carved in hidden runes, speak of bargains, not with gods, but with shadows. The chapter closes on that cliff's edge. Torches burn low. Blood stains the sand. The waves crash, carrying the echoes of screams far out to sea. But this is only the beginning. In the next chapter, we step deeper into the forests of Scandinavia, where rituals took forms so strange, so hidden, that even the bravest skalds dared not sing of them. The forest is silent. Pines stretch toward the sky like dark spears, their branches whispering in the wind. The year is 852 AD. You are standing in Uppsala, in the heart of Sweden, where a great temple rises above the land like a shadowed crown. Chroniclers wrote of it, later Christian priests, who trembled as they described what they saw here. But even their words cannot capture the terror of what really happened. Imagine a building draped in gold, its walls carved with beasts, dragons, and serpents, its roof steep and blackened by smoke. Around it, sacred groves of ash and oak. At the center of the grove, a massive tree stretches skyward, its roots tangled in blood-soaked earth. Beneath its branches, a pool of dark water reflects the firelight. This was no ordinary shrine. This was the seat of the gods, the place where sacrifices fed the hunger of Odin, Thor, and Freyr. Every 9 years, they say, the people gathered here from across the land. 9 was the sacred number. 9 days of sacrifice, 9 of every creature, and among them 9 men, chosen for their blood to satisfy the gods. Picture it, the air thick with smoke, drums pounding, voices chanting in unison. Animals, horses, cattle, goats, the smell of iron and fat fills the night. Then, when the frenzy reaches its peak, men are led forward, bound, struggling, their eyes wide with terror. They are lifted, hung from the branches of the great tree, their bodies swaying above the crowd. Others are drowned in the pool, the dark water swallowing their cries. The people cheer, believing the gods drink their souls. Adam of Bremen, a German chronicler of the 11th century, claimed to have heard from eyewitnesses of this very ritual. He wrote of bodies hanging in the sacred grove, their flesh rotting, their blood staining the soil so dark no one dared step inside. Was he exaggerating? Or did he dare to speak a truth the Vikings themselves kept secret? And here's the forbidden twist. Archaeologists have uncovered pits near old temples filled with bones, both animal and human, arranged in ritual patterns. In Trelleborg and Gamla Uppsala remains suggest sacrifices weren't myths, they were reality. And not only captives, sometimes slaves, sometimes volunteers, believing their death would honor the gods. Now pause. If you were there standing in the torchlight, the chants pounding in your chest, watching a man chosen to hang from the sacred tree wood you have cheered, or would you have felt the same dread as the Christians who later wrote of it? The truth is, these rituals were more than bloodshed. They were theater, a spectacle to unite the people, to remind them of their God's power, to keep fear alive. The Jarl or king who presided over such a ritual did not simply rule by sword, he ruled by awe. To question him was to question the gods themselves, and the seer, the women who spoke the words of fate, were at the center. Shrouded in furs, their staffs clattering with iron rings, they walked among the sacrifices, sprinkling blood, chanting to unseen powers. To some, they were priestesses, to others, witches. But in the hush of the grove, their whispers carried the weight of doom. The pool beneath the tree gleams. Warriors lean forward, faces lit by fire. The victim's body is lowered into the water, bubbles breaking the surface as the chants grow louder. Was it the gods who demanded this, or men who found power in the terror it created? Here is where the story deepens. Not all sacrifices were meant to please Odin. Some were for Freyr, the god of fertility. Imagine it. Blood spilled on the soil to ensure crops would grow. Women stepping forward with offerings of grain and mead, their faces pale in the torchlight. To refuse was to risk famine. To comply was to bind yourself to the cycle of blood. And then there were the rites no one dared speak of. Hidden rituals in the darkest groves, where seer whispered to spirits, where bodies were not only sacrificed, but broken apart, bones buried as charms, skulls mounted on poles to watch the night. Evidence of such rites has been uncovered, split deliberately, bones carved with runes, offerings of weapons bent and destroyed to seal their power. But perhaps the darkest of all was the ritual of kingship. Some sagas hint that kings themselves could be sacrificed if famine struck, if war was lost, if the gods seemed displeased, the ruler, bound to the sacred bargain, could become the ultimate offering. Imagine it. The very man who once presided over the sacrifices, now dragged beneath the sacred tree, the people chanting for his death, believing his blood would heal the land. Would you have dared to be king, knowing this fate hung over you like a shadow? The grove is silent now, save for the crackle of torches and the creak of ropes. The bodies swayed gently in the night air, the pool still rippling. The crowd disperses, faces painted with blood, hearts filled with awe and fear. They believe they have secured another 9 years of life. But in the silence of the forest, the gods remain quiet. And here lies the forbidden truth. These rituals were never about certainty. They were about desperation. In a world of famine, disease, and endless war, the people clung to the belief that sacrifice could bend fate. And in that belief, kings and jarls found their greatest power. But the story does not end in Uppsala, for there were other rituals whispered in the sagas, hidden in the east, darker still, rites not only of sacrifice, but of transformation, of men seeking to become wolves, berserkers bound to fury by blood and fire. The chapter closes with the grove still burning in your mind, bodies swaying, blood pooling, chants fading into the night. And the question lingers, were these the demands of gods, or the inventions of men desperate to control the world around them? The battlefield is silent for a breath, as though the earth itself is waiting. Then it begins. A roar erupts, not human, not animal, but something in between. The sound rips across the plain, chilling every spine that hears it. Out of the mist they come, men, but not men, berserkers, wolfskins. Their eyes are wild, their teeth bared, their bodies trembling as if gripped by something beyond mortal control. To their enemies, they are monsters. To their allies, they are holy terrors. But behind their fury lay rituals so dark and forbidden that even the sagas only whisper of them. Imagine the scene. A longhouse on the eve of battle. Outside, snow drifts against the walls, the wind carrying the smell of pine and smoke. Inside, warriors sit in a circle, firelight flickering across their faces. The air is heavy with the scent of herbs, perhaps henbane, or fly agaric mushrooms, plants known to induce visions, frenzy, madness. A seer woman walks among them, chanting low, her staff clattering with rings of iron. She sprinkles blood animal, or perhaps human, onto the fire. The flames hiss, smoke curling like serpents. The warriors breathe it in. Their chant grows louder. They beat their shields, faster and faster, until the hall vibrates like a drum. The seer speaks words older than memory, calling on Odin, on the spirits of beasts, on shadows that lurk beyond the veil. And then it happens. The warriors convulse, their eyes rolling, foam gathering at their mouths. They howl like wolves, growl like bears, tear at their clothes until their skin is bare and steaming in the cold. Their brothers watch in awe and fear. These are no longer men. These are berserkers. Here's the forbidden truth. The fury of the berserker was not madness born in the moment. It was carefully crafted, a ritual of transformation. Archaeological evidence suggests the use of hallucinogens, mushrooms, and herbs. Bones of sacrificed animals have been found near warrior graves, some carved with runes that invoke strength and rage. Was this a communion with gods or a self-inflicted possession? The sagas tell us the berserkers could feel no pain, that they fought with inhuman strength, biting their shields until their teeth broke, tearing apart men with bare hands. Enemies fled at the mere sight of them. But the sagas also whisper that when the frenzy ended, the warriors collapsed into exhaustion, vulnerable, empty. What price did they pay for their borrowed power? Now pause. If you were one of them, standing in the circle, as the smoke curled around you, would you have dared to drink the potion, inhale the fumes, surrender your body to the madness? Or would you have stayed in the shadows, terrified that once the beast entered you, it would never leave? The rituals did not end in the hall. On the battlefield, the berserkers became the living sacrifice. Their frenzy was seen as an offering to Odin, their bloodlust a prayer written in violence. When they died in their fury, it was believed their souls soared straight to Valhalla, carried by the Valkyries, to die screaming, foaming at the mouth, tearing into an enemy's flesh. This was not shame. This was holiness. But here's the darker twist. Some sagas suggest that berserkers weren't only men. There are whispers of women to shield maidens who entered the frenzy, who tore through enemies with the same unholy strength. Were they real? Or were they stories told to frighten children, to cloak the horror of bloodlust in the guise of legend? And what of the wolf warriors, the Alfadar, dressed in wolfskins? They believed they carried the spirit of the animal into battle. Some sagas describe them howling beneath the moon, their voices so wild that enemies believed an army of wolves was descending upon them. Their initiation rites were even darker. Young men, stripped naked, sent into the forest to kill a wolf with their bare hands. When they returned, wearing the pelt, they were no longer men, they were wolves in the eyes of their people. Would you have walked into that forest, unarmed, knowing only blood and teeth could win your place among the wolf warriors? The line between man and beast blurred in these rituals. To the Vikings, this was not superstition, this was power. In a world where death was always near, to become more than human was to spit in the face of fate. But there was a price. Berserkers were feared not only by enemies, but by their own kin. When their frenzy ended, they were dangerous, uncontrollable. Some kings banned them, outlawed their rituals, claiming they threatened order. Yet they persisted, hidden in the shadows, whispered of in fear. And here is the most haunting thought of all. What if the berserkers' power was not only in their rituals, but in belief itself? What if the terror they inspired was enough to break armies before the first blow? In that case, the ritual was not only transformation, it was theater. Theater so convincing it rewrote reality on the battlefield. The hall grows silent now. The warriors, their frenzy spent, lie collapsed on the floor, their bodies trembling. The seer woman sprinkles ash over them, whispering words to draw the beast back into silence. Some will wake, some will not. The line between life and death, man and animal, has been crossed, and not all return from the journey. Outside, the snow continues to fall, blanketing the forest in silence. But in the hearts of those who watched, the memory will never fade. For once you have seen a man become a beast, you can never look at him the same way again. The chapter closes on this cliffhanger. If the Vikings could blur the line between man and beast, what other lines did they dare to cross? The answer lies in rituals, even darker rituals, not of battle, but of death itself. The river is still. Its surface reflects the sky like polished obsidian. On the bank, a ship lies waiting not to sail across oceans, but across the boundary between life and death. The body of a great chieftain rests upon it, dressed in silks stolen from Byzantium, surrounded by weapons, coins, and cups of silver. But he is not alone. Around him stand his warriors, his kin, and one trembling figure whose fate has already been sealed. This is no ordinary burial. This is a passage to Valhalla, and it will be paved with fire and blood. The most chilling account we have comes from the Arab traveler Ahmad ibn Fadlan, who in 922 AD journeyed to the land of the Rus, Viking traders and raiders who had carved kingdoms along the rivers of Eastern Europe. What he saw there haunted him for the rest of his days. He wrote of a funeral for a great chieftain. The man's ship was dragged onto land, his body laid inside with treasures, weapons, food, and drink for the afterlife. But the true horror came in what followed. A slave girl stepped forward, offering herself to die with her master. Was she chosen or forced? Ibn Fadlan says she volunteered. But can we believe him? Did she see it as honor or as the only escape from bondage? Whatever her thoughts, once she stepped forward, there was no return. Picture it. She is led from tent to tent, where warriors drink with her, whispering promises of pleasure in the afterlife. Some accounts say she is given strong intoxicants, her mind clouded. Then she is led to a ritual where two men lift her onto a wooden frame shaped like a door. The seer woman steps forward, chanting in a voice that chills the air. She raises a dagger. The girl cries out once. Then the blade falls. The body is laid beside her master. The ship is set ablaze, flames leaping high, smoke curling into the sky like a black serpent. The crowd chants, drums beat, the air thick with the smell of burning flesh and pine tar. The river reflects the fire, carrying its light far into the night. Ibn Fadlan, horrified, wrote of it in detail, unable to comprehend how such a thing could be considered holy. But to the Vikings, this was not horror. This was necessity. To die with one's master was to follow him into Valhalla. To refuse was to be left behind in shame. Now pause. If you were that girl, standing on the riverbank as the ship was prepared, would you have stepped forward? Or would you have hidden among the crowd, praying no eyes found yours? Ship burials were not always so bloody. Archaeologists have uncovered graves where men and women were buried with ships, their bodies surrounded by goods and animals. But even here, the ritual speaks louder than the silence of the earth. Dogs, horses, even hawks have been found sacrificed beside their masters, their throats cut, their bones arranged. Imagine the sound, the whinny of horses silenced in an instant, the growl of dogs fading as blood stained the ground. These were not animals buried by chance. They were companions meant to serve in the next world. Their loyalty demanded even in death, flames consuming wood and flesh together, reducing everything to ash that scattered on the wind. To the Vikings, fire was the bridge between worlds. The smoke carried the soul upward, a beacon to the gods. But it also consumed all evidence, all except the whispers of those who watched. The sagas tell us of other funerary rites too, darker and stranger. Some kings, it is said, were sacrificed by their people when famine struck. their deaths meant to appease the gods and restore the land. Imagine it, the same man who once ruled, now bound, laid on a pyre, his subjects watching as his life ended in flames. Was it justice or desperation cloaked as faith? The burial mounds of Scandinavia tell their own story. At Oseberg, in Norway, archaeologists uncovered a ship burial so rich it seemed like a dream. 2 women lay inside, surrounded by tapestries, carved sleighs, chests of goods, and even sacrificed animals. Who were they? Queens, priestesses, seer women whose power demanded reverence even in death. Some bones show signs of struggle, suggesting one woman may not have gone willingly. Even in the grave, the truth is tangled. But here lies the forbidden twist. These funerals were not only for the dead, they were for the living. They were theater, displays of wealth and power. When a chieftain was burned with gold and slaves, his kin sent a message: "We are so rich, so strong, we can afford to waste life itself." The ritual bound the community in awe and fear. To question it was to question the gods. The ship creaks as flames lick higher. The girl's cries are gone now, drowned in the roar of fire. The people chant louder, believing her spirit sails with her master across the dark waters to Valhalla. Smoke drifts into the night, carrying the smell of pine, flesh, and iron. Now imagine standing there, the fire's heat burning your skin, the crack of beams collapsing, sparks flying into the night sky. Would you have felt awe or horror? The truth is this: Viking funerary rituals were never simple. They were spectacles of belief, of power, of fear. They bound the living to the dead, the people to their leaders, the community to the gods, and beneath it all, they reminded every man, woman, and child that life was fragile and death was never far. The chapter closes with the river gone dark again, the ship reduced to ash, the smoke fading into the stars. But the silence is not peace. It is the heavy silence of a secret, for there were rituals even darker, whispered of in the shadows, not to honor the dead, but to speak with them. The mound rises in silence. Earth piled high over bones and treasures, its surface cloaked in grass and shadow. To the casual eye, it is a hill. To the Vikings, it is something more adore. Beneath its roots, the dead wait. Some rest, some do not. And when the living dared disturb their slumber, rituals followed that would chill the blood of even the bravest warrior. The sagas whisper of the Draugr, the restless dead. They were not ghosts, but corpses, swollen, blackened, stinking of decay, yet walking still. These beings clung to the treasures buried with them, to the lands they once ruled, to grudges that even death could not dissolve. To fight one was to fight death itself. To control one that required ritual. Imagine a midnight sky, stars hidden by clouds. A group of men creep toward a burial mound, torches smothered, their breath fogging in the cold. At their head walks a seer woman, her staff glinting with bronze rings. They stop at the mound. She chants, low and guttural, her words thick with power. The soil trembles. Then, with hands trembling, they begin to dig. The stench rises first. Then the sound, the groan of something that should not move. A body, eyes glowing faintly in the dark, hair matted, nails like claws. The Draugr. Some accounts claim it could crush men with inhuman strength, that its touch carried death. The only way to defeat it was with fire, cutting off its head, burning the corpse, scattering the ashes in the sea. But others didn't want to defeat it. They wanted to bargain. Here lies the forbidden truth. Grave magic was not always about banishing the dead. Sometimes it was about summoning them for knowledge. The Vikings believed the dead could see what the living could not, the future, the will of the gods, the path of fate. To awaken them was to risk everything for a glimpse of tomorrow. Picture the ritual. A seer woman standing on the mound, staff raised, chanting as the ground cracks. A corpse rises, its mouth opening with a hiss. She leans close, whispering questions. The men around her tremble. Will the dead answer? Will it curse them, or will it drag one of them back beneath the earth as payment? In the saga of Archaeological, warriors disturb a mound to take a cursed sword. They battle the undead guardian, its strength inhuman, its hatred endless. Was this just story? Or was it memory retellings of rituals gone wrong? And here's the twist. Archaeologists have uncovered graves where bodies were pinned with stones, their heads severed, their limbs broken. These were not ordinary burials. These were safeguards. The living feared the dead might rise again, so they bound them even in death, crushing them beneath rock, silencing them with blades. Fear of the Draugr was not legend, it was lived reality. Now pause. If you lived then, and your chieftain died, would you dare disturb his grave for treasure or wisdom? Or would you leave him in silence, afraid his corpse might rise against you? But necromancy was not the only grave magic. There were rituals of prophecy, the Utticida, sitting out on the graves at night. A man or woman would sit atop a mound in the dark, alone, chanting, waiting for visions. Some claimed they saw the dead rise to speak with them. Others said they felt the breath of spirits on their necks, whispers in their ears. To sit atop a grave was to place yourself between worlds, neither living nor dead, a vessel for secrets too dangerous to carry. The sagas tell of one woman, RDS, who sat out on a grave and returned with eyes that no longer looked at the living. She spoke of doom, of storms, of blood yet spilled. Was she cursed? Or did she carry knowledge too heavy for a human heart? And then there is the story of Eric the Red's saga, where a seer woman named Horbjörg, Little Velva, the little prophetess, performed rites of necromancy in a longhouse. She sat on a raised platform, staff in hand, cloaked in catskin. Women circled her, chanting ancient songs. She called on spirits of the dead, and they answered. Her words chilled the air, her prophecies turning men's faces pale. The dead spoke through her lips. Would you have sat in that hall, listening to her voice, knowing the words came from beyond the grave? Would you have dared to ask a question? The line between respect and terror blurred in these rituals. The Vikings feared the dead, but they also needed them. Every burial mound was a locked chest of knowledge, and the key was blood, chant, and courage. Some opened it, some paid dearly for trying. And here's the forbidden twist. Christianity despised these rites. Priests called them witchcraft, devilry, lies of demons. But they could not erase the memory. Even as churches rose, people still whispered of the old ways, still feared the restless dead, still broke skulls and pinned corpses with stones. The rituals lived on in shadows, in whispers, in graves that no one dared to open. The mound stands silent again. The soil covers its secrets. The men who dared dig it are gone, some carrying treasures, some carrying curses. The air is cold, heavy with dread. The chapter closes here, on the image of a torch flickering at the edge of the mound, the dead watching in silence. For in the final chapter, the story darkens further still. There we confront the most forbidden ritual of all blood rites, said to open not just the doors of death, but the very gates of power itself. The night is heavy with silence. The sea lies dark beyond the fjords, its waves lapping against stone. But in the valley, a fire burns brighter than the stars. Around it, warriors gather, faces painted red, eyes wide with something between fear and hunger. At the center stands the Jarl, his hands raised, his voice trembling with the weight of ancient words. Tonight is no feast, no funeral, no battle prayer. Tonight is a blood rite one so forbidden, so dangerous, that even the sagas refuse to speak of it plainly. The Vikings believed blood carried power, not just life, but fate itself. To spill, it was to release energy, to shape destiny. This belief is woven through every ritual we've seen. Sacrificers at Uppsala, the blood-smeared berserkers, the ship burials drenched in crimson. But some rites pushed this belief further, too far. Imagine the ritual, a great bowl placed at the center, carved with runes of power. Into it flows the blood of animals, goats, horses, cattle, each slaughtered in turn. The crowd chants, their voices low, the sound rolling like thunder through the valley. Then, with a single gesture, the Jarl calls forward a man, perhaps a slave, perhaps a prisoner, perhaps, in darker times, even one of their own kin. His throat is cut, his blood joining the rest, steam rising in the cold night air. The seer dips a branch into the bowl, sprinkling the crowd. Warriors lift their faces, mouths open, some even drinking. They believe the blood carries the will of the gods, that in tasting it they share in their strength. Can you imagine it? Warm blood on your tongue, iron on your teeth, the roar of your kin around you. Would you have believed in that moment that you were becoming more than human? The sagas rarely mention this, but archaeology speaks louder. At sites across Scandinavia, bones have been found in pits, cut and burned, arranged with ritual precision. Some show signs of bloodletting, of slaughter not for survival, but for ceremony. And in the poetry of the skalds, Odin himself is said to have demanded sacrifice, who hung on Yggdrasil, the world tree, bleeding for 9 nights to gain wisdom. If even the Allfather paid in blood, how could mortals refuse? And here's the darkest twist. Some blood rites weren't offerings to the gods. They were pacts. The sagas whisper of men who sought seer, not for prophecy, but for power. They spilled blood onto runes, chanting spells to bind fate itself. Some carved runes into their skin, believing the blood that welled from the cuts sealed the magic into their bodies. Others offered their own flesh, slashing themselves before idols, daring the gods to ignore such devotion. Were these men fanatics? Or were they tapping into something real, something terrifying? Now pause. If you were there, watching your leader cut his palm, letting his blood drip onto the fire, swearing oaths that bound not just himself, but everyone present, would you have joined him? Or would you have stepped back, afraid the oath might chain your soul forever? The most forbidden of all were blood oaths between men. Two warriors cutting their palms, pressing them together, letting their blood mingle. They swore brotherhood unto death, their souls tied beyond this world. To break such an oath was to invite the wrath of the gods. Some kings sealed alliances this way, their kingdoms bound not by words but by blood. The sagas call it sacred. The church called it blasphemy. Which would you believe? But the rites did not stop at oaths. There were whispers of rituals, where blood was spilled not just to honor gods, but to summon them. Imagine a circle of warriors, their blood dripping onto runes carved in stones, chanting until their voices broke, believing Odin himself might step into the fire. Did he? Or was it only madness and smoke? The sagas are silent, but silence often hides what we are not meant to know. Here lies the forbidden truth. These rituals were not relics of superstition. They were instruments of power. A jarl who dared demand blood showed his people he commanded not only men, but the gods themselves. A warrior who drank blood proved he had no fear of death. A seer who whispered with the dead bound the future to her will. These were not games. They were tools to rule. But power always comes with a cost. The more blood spilled, the more chains of fate wound tight around those who wielded it. Kings who demanded too much risked rebellion. Seer women who spoke too boldly risked exile, or worse. And those who swore blood oaths sometimes found themselves dragged into wars they could not escape. Now, think of this. The rituals did not vanish with the coming of Christianity. They sank underground, whispered of in shadows. Even centuries later, Icelandic grimoires books of black magic describe rites using blood, runes, and sacrifice. The echoes of Viking blood magic lingered long after their ships were gone. The fire in the valley burns lower now. The bowl is empty, its sides caked with crimson. The warriors stand silent, their faces pale, their eyes bright. They believe the gods have heard, that the pact is sealed. But in the shadows, perhaps the gods whisper something else, that mortals who play with blood play with fire. And here the story draws to its close. 6 chapters, 6 journeys into the forbidden heart of the Vikings. We began with raids, where blood was spilled not only in battle, but in ritual. We walked through sacred groves, where men swung from trees. We watched berserkers become beasts. We stood on riverbanks as ships burned with the dead. We opened graves to speak with corpses. And now we end here, with blood itself, the final, forbidden key. But the question remains, why does this story still matter today? Because it tells us something about power, about fear, about the human hunger to control fate in a world of chaos. The Vikings were not savages. They were people who lived in a world as uncertain as ours, of storms, of disease, of war. And in that uncertainty, they turned to rituals that gave them meaning, that gave them control. However dark, however forbidden, they were attempts to wrestle with the unknown. And perhaps, if we look closely, we see something of ourselves. For don't we, to perform rituals different in shape, but born of the same hunger to bind chaos, to give order to the storm? The fire dies, the valley falls silent. The echoes of chants fade into the night, but the story of the dark Viking rituals does not vanish. It lingers, waiting, a shadow in history, reminding us that the past is never truly buried.